going on. Pete's gone live twice in like a couple of hours. This was kind of pre-planned because I posted a couple of, well, it was yesterday actually. I posted a poll around Rishi Sunak, suggesting that we need to make mathematics in schools compulsory up until the age of 18. And I posted on LinkedIn, I posted on Instagram, I also posted on stories, well, shorts here on YouTube, and there's been quite a lot of engagement on the topic. So I thought, who could I get on to have a conversation about this who could make it quite interesting? He loves numbers. And I remember that I was on Pack Lunch a couple of months ago, and Bobby Siegel was on the show, and he's a mathematician. I'm going to let him introduce himself. He's been in TV for quite a bit. He's done. Actually, I'll let him to talk about himself because I can't do him justice. I really can't. I just said to him before we came live, his Wikipedia is pretty impressive, and for someone who you think of maths as being boring, and I'll tell you some stories about how I came across maths when I was in school. It terrified me. To have a Wikipedia page and do the stuff that he's done has been pretty amazing. So I'm going to bring Bobby in. Bobby, welcome, mate.
Hi, Peter. Thank you.
Thank-
It's a pleasure to be here.
yeah, cheers, mate.
Yeah, just I remember we met back on Steph Pack Lunch, and again it's all live recorded, so we're all there like
Yeah,
moving around, shifting around, and
yeah,
all the sort of the adrenaline of
yeah,
being on in a live environment. So
yeah.
for people that haven't come across me before, so professionally I am a school maths teacher part time. I teach in a secondary school in East London, but most people who recognize me. They'll probably recognize me from University Challenge. I was captain of
Hmm.
my Cambridge team back in 2017. And then for some reason, to be honest, I didn't know the reasons, I ended up going viral on social media, partly for like my knowledge and enthusiasm. The BBC gave my own road trip show on the back of that. And then since then, I've gone on to become a TV presenter. I've also my own game shows, road trip shows. I sort of dabble now, weirdly enough, like in the celebrity world of doing like celebrity game shows, celebrity road trip, celebrity shows. Yeah, all these random things. But I'm an author. I write part time for the Financial Times. I have a podcast based on maths. And actually, before I went into um, education, I actually worked in finance for 7 years. So I was a trader at Lehman Brothers. For
Oh, right,
those that have
okay.
got long memories, Lehman Brothers was at the
They
time one of the
disappeared.
leading banks in the world, but it collapsed. I was a
Yeah.
trader at Nomura, a Japanese bank. Then I moved to PwC and qualified as a chartered accountant. And now this is where the sort of epiphany moment. So I'd actually run a social enterprise in education for about 7 years previously, supporting sixth form students applying to
Uh-huh.
university. And actually, our organization donated £1 million to various charities as well. And so I always
Nice.
know that education was something that drew me. So then I changed at the age of 30, moved into teaching, did my teacher training, my master's at Cambridge, started my PhD on maths anxiety. But during that stage, I was captain of my Cambridge team on University Challenge, and then life changed. So now I am, doing the same things I did before, but with a larger audience, I guess.
So Lehman Brothers doing the trading, accountancy qualifications, then obviously you studied maths as well, right? Because
Yeah,
you've
maths. I'm
you've
a
got to do.
mathematician. Yeah.
So how long is it taking you to do all of that, and get all of those qualifications then?
A while because it was by the age of 30 that I decided to change and become a teacher. So I
Oh, right,
spent like
okay.
so from A levels, university, my chartered accountancy, all the banking qualifications. Yeah. So over the course of 12 years, from finishing A levels till the age of 30, it was pretty much focused towards finance. That was
Uh-huh.
the big chunk of my career.
So I've always been curious about this because I know I used to work in Canary Wharf, so I know a
Yeah.
few traders and all that kind of stuff. And I always found that there is always this synergy, and I say this to kids now when they talk about trading. There seems to be the synergy between mathematics and trading because it's pattern recognition,
Mm.
isn't it? And being able to work on a fly really quick. How did you? Was it a conscious move from on your part? Mathematics and trading, did they meet easily or?
Yeah, I think back in the sort of mid 2000s, um, anyone that was very numerical, very mathematical, very quantitative, the city in particular. Nowadays, to be honest, the city is always a law for young sort of numerate graduates. But now there's lots
Hmm.
of things like people can be, work in tech, be entrepreneurs, social media. So there's all new careers that didn't really exist 10, 12 years ago. But back then, anyone that was very numerate would be drawn towards the city. So
Hmm.
back then, I started reading the Financial Times. running my own personal investment fund on the side. And I think the more I got into, the more I realized actually, if you're sharp and numerical and you're keen, because obviously I might be mathematical, but understanding the markets is a different skill, because
Yeah.
that's, what are bonds, what are interest rates,
Yeah.
what's the Fed in the US saying, well, what's happening with China. They're things
Yeah.
that you don't learn in mathematics.
Yeah.
But if you've got a mathematical base, it means that understanding those things will be easier if you've got the enthusiasm.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and that brings us on to the topic. So I know that you were on TV talking about this actually. So Rishi Sunak, I think it was yesterday, or day before yesterday, kind of said that he suggested that it's worthwhile making mathematics compulsory up to the age of 18. Now. I know that you're probably like that idea, and I think you said on air that you like that idea. Give me your side of your opinion for this, because when I was in school, I hated
Mm.
mathematics.
Yeah, yeah,
I I mean I got A levels in the end and I did pass maths, but
yeah.
I think the reason why I didn't do too well with maths is because for a good number of years I didn't like the teacher. The 1 year where I did really, really well is because the
Yeah.
teacher was fit. That was it. All the boys listened in class. That was a good year. But I didn't do well with maths. So,
Okay.
what's your take on that piece of a suggestion from Rishi?
Yeah, so this news came out, I think, on Wednesday. So actually, I'll tell you the story. So I was playing badminton with my family. We're getting into badminton now. It's quite a nice sport. You can play indoors, avoid the cold. And it's 7 to 8. We had that slot booked, and we're getting all the shuttlecock set up. And then at 7:10, I was about to do a tweet about badminton, saying, I'm having fun with my family playing badminton. I saw somebody from BBC Breakfast followed me, and normally BBC Breakfast has lots of different staff that work, and they get a lot,
Hmm.
there's a turnover of staff that work in the production. And then I saw a call coming in, and I picked it up. I said, "Hi, it's Bobby Seagull speaking." And they said, "Oh, hi, it's I won't say her name from BBC Breakfast. Are you free for a quick chat?" And I just walked out of the room, and she said, "This is all strictly embargoed, but the Prime Minister is going to make an announcement tomorrow about making maths compulsory in some shape or form till the age of 18. Are you free to come and have a conversation with us?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And she said, "Oh, can you give us your quick opinion?" I said, "Oh, I am playing badminton. Can I get back to you after the badminton? But I'll definitely come and do your uh, interview tomorrow." And as it turned out, I'll discuss my views in a second. I ended up doing 7 TV interviews and 20 radio interviews. I guess because
Wow.
when people are thinking like bookers, oh, there's a new policy of maths education. Who's the maths teacher that we know? You Google
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
and probably my name
yeah,
comes quite highly up. So it was
yeah,
actually probably the most intense day of media work I've ever done. I've done quite a lot of media work.
yeah,
But my line has always been this. Firstly, like, I'm very happy that we have a prime minister that values numeracy. And I know that, in fact, a few of the journalists did say, "Oh, but Bobby, we've got other issues like, NHS, and we've
yeah.
got recovery from COVID,
Hmm.
thinking about Brexit, all these other things." And I said, of course, they're all important issues, but it's not mutually exclusive to think about that and think about the future of the education of our country. And
Hmm.
our prime minister recognizes that maths and numeracy in particular is a valuable part in that. And what I always said in every single interview is that the devil will be in the detail, because, like you said, so many people will do maths at 16. In fact, one third of children fail at 16. Is putting them through 2 more years of maths, doing Pythagoras and trigonometry, going to make
Gonna
them
make a
more
difference.
competent in the real world? To be honest,
Yep.
my answer is something where the maths world, the pure maths world might not like me for saying it, but I think actually they don't need to do any more Pythagoras or trigonometry. I love those things.
Hmm.
I love the pure side of maths, the geometry, the calculus, the trigonometry, but they are meant for people that are going to do A-level maths, university maths, become scientists, maybe data analysts, statisticians, but for the vast majority of people, they're not the skills they need. So I think
Hmm.
with Mr. Sunak, he did hint at it. He talked about how we need people that feel comfortable with numbers. I think he used the example of people looking at mortgage rates and how they switch
Yeah.
mortgages. So I think he's thinking in terms of we need a country that's more financially literate. He didn't say those words, but I think that's
Yep.
what he meant
Yep.
by mathematically literate.
Yeah. And that's an interesting take because whilst I struggled with maths, I
Mhm.
kind of understood it. I was okay at it. I got a
Uh-huh.
pass mark. It wasn't my favorite subject, and I
Yeah.
did like physics, chemistry, biology.
Well, he did some
I
hard college,
preferred.
rock solid
I know.
subject.
Yeah, I preferred physics and chemistry over
Okay.
mathematics for some strange reason. I don't know. It just the idea of physics was a little bit more exciting to me when you're talking about gravity and all that relativity and all that kind of stuff. It was more interesting in that way, and that's probably down to the teacher that I had at the time. He just was more enthusiastic than the majority of my maths teachers and stuff. And this leads on to the real question of, you know, interest rates are important. And I'm big on obviously financial education. Do you see that there is an intersection between mathematics and financial literacy, financial education? And if you do see an intersect, where do you think it intersects exactly?
Yeah, so the way I would see it is, so imagine, do you remember Venn diagrams in school? You know, the big
Hmm.
circles, often they
Yeah.
use it for probability. So mathematics is the main circle. So that's
Hmm.
encompasses everything, your geometry, your algebra, your calculus, your Pythagoras theorem, your stats, your probability, your data, all that sort of stuff. That's all mathematics.
Hmm.
Numeracy is one aspect of that. It's a subset, probably the most important aspect. And financial literacy and obviously financial education then is connected to that, because numeracy is all about application of mathematics,
Hmm.
not in a theoretical. Because at university, people can spend time doing pure maths, and I've got friends that are pure maths professors, and they look at things again. I think it's really beautiful. It's an expression of human creativity, but it's very much something that's very mathematical, very abstract. Probably won't have applications to the real world for maybe a couple of hundred years, but
Hmm.
they sit there working creatively. But the numeracy side, which is about looking at percentages, your ratios, decimals, currency conversion, even things like household, like how do you convert Celsius to
Yep.
Fahrenheit, or how do you read a
Yep.
bus
Yep.
timetable, or how do you manipulate an Excel spreadsheet to add things up. That sort of side, the numeracy, that's what I'm hoping the government really focuses on, because our country, we've got a mathematics phobia, and that, to be honest, I'm sad about that.
Mm.
But as a human being, it doesn't make me so sad that people are afraid of Pythagoras and trigonometry. It'll make me devastated if people are then afraid of using numbers when they're thinking about, applying for a loan, getting a car, or buying a season ticket for their
Hmm.
rail. And if that fear of maths then infects their ability to work with numbers day to day, then I think that's a tragedy. That's why
Yeah.
financial literacy and financial education have got to be connected to numeracy. So if the government's really thinking about making this a serious policy, and again, the skeptics will say that there's nothing firm in writing. It's a promise and a pledge rather than
Hmm.
something written in paper.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, it's that they've got to find that missing piece. They've got to get the numeracy and financial literacy linked together.
Mm. It's interesting you said, because obviously numeracy being the application of it all. I, with my background, I mean, so I'd done maths in school, but
Mm,
I haven't used I haven't used algebra or anything like that
mm,
in any of my roles. Really,
yeah.
it hasn't been called for per se. And I know that currently it is kind of the existing financial literacy curriculum is tagged on to that mathematicals, because you're saying it's the application of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still a firm believer that I think it needs to be separated, because there's so much in terms of the practical world these days that you can't cover in maths. And if it
Mm,
is included in the maths curriculum, we need to maybe reimagine how we actually teach it in terms of the practicalities of how you take that critical thinking into things like interest rates,
mm,
mortgages, that kind of stuff, but broaden it out. And I don't know what your views are on that.
So I'll tell you. So my school and several schools I have friends that teach in, what they have a policy is maths. We are driven by what the national curriculum is, what's an exam, and we'll teach towards that. Even though sometimes I'll try and make things, I'll bring up a salient point about interest rates. But the way that financial literacy is taught is through PSE, so personal
Hmm.
social education, or PSHE, different variations of it. So these are form teachers, and I think 20 minutes once a week on a Friday in my school, for example, PSHE will be taught. And for that session, it's about financial literacy. But here's what the challenge is: PSE is taught by all form teachers. Not
Hmm.
all form teachers we know are comfortable with A maths or financial
Hmm.
literacy, and yet
Yeah.
they're teaching it. So I think, even though in theory there is that weekly 20-minute slot in my school, most of the teachers delivering it just don't feel comfortable because they've not been trained to be
Yeah.
financial literacy teachers.
Yeah.
So what I think needs to be done is it needs to be made more formal. And I think the reality is the only thing that makes schools pay serious attention to this is if there's a genuine, real qualification that they get assessed on. Because if we get assessed on it through Ofsted, and again, I got separate million, I could have a million-hour conversation on Ofsted and its merits or demerits. But if schools are assessed on something through an exam, through a GCSE, whatever qualification, then schools will deliver. If it's something that's just there as a sort of like a nice to have additional package, which is what it is now, it's always going to be at the bottom of your priorities. And that's what I
Yeah.
think it is now.
Yeah. It's funny. It's interesting you say this because I'm looking into this because I would love to be able to. I think that there is a way that you can introduce financial education from, I guess, the realms of my background and my experience into school, make it really engaging for kids. But I completely agree with you. My partner, she is a teacher. So we have that. The issue is you can't teach what you don't know.
Mm,
And when a teacher isn't necessarily comfortable with a subject, you can't really get that enthusiasm, make it relevant, make it creative, work with the room to make it something that kids are able to pick up on and, really get enthused and bought into. And there was a government consultation piece, I think it was back in 2018-19. And the piece basically said, look, when you look at financial education specifically in schools, there is some help that is needed from, the financial services industry, my industry.
mm,
Um, but the reality is, what bank or what investment house, what set of financial advisors are going to go into schools and actually teach this stuff? And I think there is a big gap there that needs to be met. I'm a big believer that there may be a way to actually use technology to provide something that could be rolled into schools.
mhm,
But I guess it's just really there's the practical logistics of actually making that happen with Ofsted, and those
mm,
are the
mm.
hurdles that we need to cross.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. The financial industry, to be honest, some organizations, like I know Barclays, for example, produce something called like life skills, which they have resources that schools can use. But I think with schools, this is what the issue is. Schools, like there'll always be, this will be the same thing in 10, 20 years ago, the same in 20 years. There'll always be too many things, too little time. That's always going to be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
case.
yeah.
But I think financial education is so important. And I'll give you just one example anecdote from my own experience. So I teach in Newham in East London. I've been teaching. I've been now. This is my actually now. I'm trying to think. I started teaching in 2014 February, so it's coming up to 9 years. So
Wow.
some of my
Yeah.
some of my students I taught at the very beginning, they're now adults in their early mid 20s. And if they see me in the high street, to be honest, most students they try and avoid former teachers. They're like they don't talk to their teacher. But some
You
of
were
the
the
nice
cool
ones,
teacher though, Bobby.
yeah, I know. Some of the funny, some of them they think I'm the cool teacher. I don't know how that happened, but some of them will say, "Oh, sir, you're Mr. Seagull." I'm like, "Yeah, were you Josh? Were you Josh? Oh, so how do you remember my name?" They get excited if I remember the name. Anyway, there was a student called Josh, and genuinely, they'll say, "Oh, sir, you're a good teacher. Enjoy the enthusiasm, but sir, why do you teach us about interest rates? I don't understand
Mm,
loans. I don't understand my student loan. Well, what does it
mm,
mean, the CPI, RPI?" They genuinely have the ones, especially the ones that are more I guess, a curiosity. They'll say, "We genuinely wanted to learn about this, but you didn't deliver this for us." And obviously, it's
mm.
not my fault. It's not in the curriculum. So clearly,
Yeah.
there's a demand from young people for this because they keep telling me, "Why do we spend so much time on Pythagoras and trigonometry and when they're the things that I don't use at all?" But financial education wasn't there. And I
Hmm.
think the answer we had before, I can only teach what's in the curriculum. As a
Yeah.
teacher, sometimes if I
Yeah.
carve out 5 minutes, like we're doing percentages, I can say, "Okay, we're going to spend 5 minutes now just looking at what the interest rate announcement means, and we'll do a practice question on percentages there." But that's for me creating space, and not all teachers will do that.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately it has to come from government. If government decides that financial education is that important, and we clearly, people like us, we believe it is, if they
Hmm.
put it in the curriculum, one way is they can embed it into maths education, or they make it a separate actual freestanding qualification. It's like I know in
Hmm.
Scotland they have a separate qualification called arithmetic. That's like numeracy, but
Yeah.
young people, I don't know if it still exists, but it definitely was there. Young people that didn't like the theoretical mathematics would still come up with arithmetic qualifications. I
Hmm.
think there's now a need for a financial education qualification. FE, I don't know
Yeah.
what you want to call it, financial
Yeah.
literacy, but
Yeah.
because education was made like pretty much, I think, okay, in the 19th century, Britain was industrializing 1800s, 1850s. Most young people worked in the coal mines, in the factories. And then at one stage, the government said, I think Lord Shaftesbury, actually, one person said, we can't do this. Children must be educated. And then they opened schools to keep young people away from the factories. And they have,
Hmm.
20, 30 students sitting in line, teacher with a blackboard, writing things, and the kids will copy down, do fractions, do ratios, write down bits from the Bible, possibly. Most of it rote learning. And now we're in 2022, or 2023, actually, 2023. Teaching's obviously got better, but it's still the same thing. The teacher at the front,
Yeah.
you write stuff on
Yep.
the board. I write down Pythagoras theorem. They copy into their book, do a few questions. It's not really changed for like 150
Yeah.
years. And even the curriculum, financial education, 150 years ago wasn't relevant. Now it is, but it's not there.
Yeah.
I think it's like
Yeah.
people have got to be in the government have got to be pushed to include
Yeah.
it.
Man, I cannot agree with you more on that point. I just think that the world has evolved so much. Like kids these days are coming up against brand new things. Like kids these days will know what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are. Like, trust me, when I was like 13, 14 years old, like I wasn't looking, there was nothing like that. I wasn't thinking anything like that. Like, of
Yeah.
course not, and as the world evolves, we need to have things like the education system evolve alongside that, because these kids are faced with a completely different reality to what it used to be back in the day. And the hardest bit of this is getting government to to realize it and actually pivot, make the bold decision to make the change. That's the bigger battle to try and win. And I don't really know how you would tackle that. It has to take some kind of influence. I think if you were Martin Lewis, you might be able to make some headway in some way, shape, or form. But it's a long battle.
Because he's been pushing for years and years
He
on
created a
financial
little book
literacy.
thing, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which was
So
really, really good.
yeah, from his own pocket, because the government didn't fund it, he's sent out textbooks to every single school in the country. So my school has a physical copy. We sometimes use the electronic version, and it's a brilliant book. But again, it's a book that schools can use at their discretion. So if a teacher, again, PSE, personal social education, is the only window of opportunity to do that. So if the school's already got their own curriculum mapped out with,
Hmm.
like religious education, sex education, social education, then the windows for the financial education is so tiny and
So
small.
small. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, what I said before, because financial education is delivered by just form teachers, a lot just depends on that teacher itself. So one of my friends at my school, he used to work in the city for a few years. So whenever he delivers his financial education class, I've seen it. They're brilliant. He will bring
Hmm.
up BBC articles.
Yeah.
Recently, when the interest rates went up, he put it up and asked students to discuss what that means. But other teachers that, for whatever reason, maybe you're a
You haven't
music
got the background. Yeah.
or art teacher and you've never really
Yeah.
thought about finance, when you're trying to deliver financial literacy, it's not possible. It's
Yeah.
unfair on them. So
Yeah.
there's a case for like, do we need to think about how we can train teachers, maybe maths teachers, I don't know, maybe physics, I don't know what teachers, but certain teachers that can teach financial literacy and making it compulsory. And in fact, I would say like Ofsted think about things like, are there ways that we can children are exposed to like culture and museums and art. I think financial literacy has to be one of their key bits in which they assess schools, because it's a gross negligence that we let young people leave schools without understanding the financial world.
Yeah, I'm 100% on the same page with you there. 100%. So for everyone who's watching, because we've got a few on here, and there'll be people who will watch on the restream, and this is actually live on Twitter as well. How do people actually find you, Bobby?
So Twitter at Bobby_Seagull, Instagram the same, TikTok the same, Facebook the same, Bobby Seagull, and I think I do have a YouTube channel, Bobby Seagull TV. It tends not to be live stuff. I did a lot of live stuff on education lockdown, but occasionally I just repost some telly interviews there. So I'm pretty much at every platform.
Yeah, I watched your TED talk, by the way. It was pretty good.
Cheers. But yeah, I think it's
On
just
the
trying to
magic.
show people why maths, anyone can do maths. That's what I was
Yeah.
positive. Yeah.
And if you're watching this either live right now or on the replay, you should go and check out the TED talk. It's actually pretty cool. It gets you to think differently about maths and stuff. So I appreciate you for doing this, mate. Really, I only reached out to you literally this morning. Was it this morning?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
Yeah,
Funnily
it was
enough,
literally this
in a little
morning.
gap, I had another BBC interview just before this, and in a little gap, I was just watching something on the BBC, a drama called Industry. set in the financial markets. To be honest, it's a bit of a risque program because there's a lot of like stuff that's 18 plus just to make it a bit sexy. But the
Uh-huh.
watching it reminded me of like the financial markets, and so many people just need to have an awareness because whether everyone will earn money, you need to manage that money, and we want the
Yeah.
nation to feel comfortable. If we're having again, we got 1/3 of children that leave school and they fail GCSE maths.
Yeah.
So these people think they can't do numbers at all, and that has to be
Hmm.
transformed. And that's why the devil is in the detail. But I'm glad we have a prime minister that says that maths and numeracy is important.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think he's done a good job so far. And I think that I don't know, I think he's young enough to be able to think outside the box a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people will label criticism of it at him that he's kind of out of touch because he's so wealthy. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but he's young enough to be able to think outside the box a little bit, and I encourage that 100%. But this has been a really good conversation, mate. I appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you on the circuit at some point. But I will definitely speak to you because I've got a couple of ideas around the whole financial education thing. I've got meetings to join the board, or to be at least be an advisor to a board of a group of academies, because I want to understand how it actually works in practice when you're talking about financial education in schools, and
Yeah.
what the boards are thinking, and how the machine works. So I'll be doing that this year, but it'll be good to keep in touch with you, mate, and
Absolutely,
continue
Peter.
to speak. Cool.
Absolutely. Cheers.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you to Bobby for joining. I know that this is the second live of the evening. Go watch the first one because I talk about Tesla, and people have been asking me about Tesla for quite some time. I give you my honest views on that point. But thank you so much. Have an amazing weekend. I'll see you guys on Monday now. I might do a Q&A on Sunday, but if not, it will be Monday. Catch you later on. Cheers.